When I was a kid, I had the bright idea of gluing a glow-in-the-dark star above my light switch so that I could find it at night. But one day I decided I didn't want it there anymore, and so I decided to rip it off. And let's just say that was a bad idea. But instead of going through the tedious process of sanding this down and then putting spackle in it and then painting it over again, I thought I'd challenge myself and make a new light switch cover that's tall enough to cover this mistake. And also make it aesthetically pleasing so it's not just this very boring shade of white. Important to note, this has been here for more than 10 years. I don't know why I suddenly decided I couldn't stand it anymore. But I can't stand it anymore, so we're going to do something about it. Hi, my name is Emily, and I'm an amateur electrician. I mean, I guess this isn't really an electrician's job, but let's just go see what supplies we have to work with. For this project, I once again dug out some leftover sandalwood. This time, I'm using much thicker boards than the ones I used for my mini vampire box. I measured the dimensions of the light switch, made a very sophisticated paper template, and then set about tracing it and cutting it out on the sandalwood. Now, while the sandalwood is cuttable with a razor blade, something that's much more convenient than whipping out the circular saw, it still takes a bit of elbow grease to cut through it, especially going horizontally over the grain. In fact, I would even say it destroyed my elbow grease because the next day my elbow was incredibly sore from the sheer force it took to cut through the wood. Just look at how much my hand is shaking. But I was patient. I scored through the wood bit by bit until I was able to pop the middle out. Here you can see how easy and buttery smooth it is to cut with the grain. Just 2 swipes and there it goes. There was also the rounded corners I had to deal with, and I wasn't arrogant enough to think that I could achieve it with my box cutter, so I just cut off as much material as I could for the time being. I did not get any sanding footage because I didn't want to, but luckily this was a fairly simple and quick sanding process that took all of 5 minutes since the wood was pretty soft. I rounded off those corners with some 120 grit and also rounded off all the other corners for a much softer look. With the base done, it was time to paint it, and I decided to take inspiration from this hand-carved wooden box I got at the thrift store. I don't really know anything about wood carving, and I didn't feel ready to try at this moment, so I instead dug out this old embossing kit, I guess you'd call it. It's a fancy card making kit that's been in my family for a long time. It comes with these metal plates that you can trace along with this ballpoint tool, and this kit was made for paper, but I thought maybe it could work on wood too. Before I just went straight to the switch plate, however, I decided to exercise my forethought and test it out on a scrap piece of wood first. I decided to use this tulip set. And lo and behold, it works! I just had to go over the lines a few times to really get that indent. Feeling confident in this technique, I started sketching out the design. I freehanded the mountain because, as you might have been able to tell, there was no mountain template, and loosely traced the metal plates with a pencil to make sure I did like the composition. Uh-oh, here you can see me contemplating something. This is because I realized I didn't really want to use the pre-made designs as pretty as they were, and so I decided to erase what I just did and freehand the rest. And then I just started carving. I must say this was a very long and tedious and kind of painful process. Despite how soft the sandalwood is, I still had to press pretty hard to leave an imprint, and I had to go over each line several times very carefully as so not to go astray. I also started having doubts if the imprints were going to be deep enough to show through the paint, and if I should have just sucked it up and tried real wood carving. Not to mention my fingers were getting sore and stiff from gripping the ballpoint tool so hard, and actually I think maybe this was what destroyed my elbow grease. And my shoulder grease, if we're being honest. But several long YouTube videos later, I was done with the carving, and this was what it looked like. As you may be able to tell, my hand was in a lot of pain. A short break later, I began the painting process. I started with a deep ochre color as the base. The carvings were still visible after this coat of paint, which gave me some hope. Next, I put some dark brown paint into the carved lines. My hope was that once this was dried and I went over the rest of the switch plate, the carved lines would get skipped over by the new layer of paint and leave the brown paint in the grooves untouched. This would save me a lot of precision painting, and it seemed like that's what my box inspiration did as well. Unfortunately, this wasn't what happened. It turned out my carved lines were too shallow, and attempting to even dry brush over it covered up the brown paint pretty entirely. And so, precision painting it was. Once I got closer to the end and more of the messy brown paint was cleaned up, the process got really satisfying. It was like a high-stakes coloring book. I especially felt more confident once I painted in the red flowers. It was just so clean. The only thing left was to paint the leaves, so I went ahead and did that. So the painting is all done, and then next I'm going to apply some matte sealer, but first I'm going to let this all dry and cure out, just to prevent any sort of smudging or melting. Okay, so here I have the piece all sprayed and sealed. You can see it's a much more uniform sheen now. And I also got these screws from another socket cover that we took off at some point. Already painted a beautiful hue of landlord white. And I think I'm just going to paint them brown to match my light switch cover. And I know what you're thinking. Emily, this is in direct violation of code XYZ123 from the whatever manual, where it states that a faceplate must not be made out of combustible materials. Worry not, for I have covered it back with electrical tape. Off screen, I also decided to add a frame just to raise it up from the wall, the way a real socket cover does. And with that, it was all ready for installation and the final reveal.